Welcome to Sports Psychology and to Fordham's Summer Session 1. The first time that it's being taught online in these strange times of the COVID crisis that we're facing. I've loved this course, have taught it many times over the years, and one of the things I like best about it is getting to know the students and watching the students all get to know each other. I think even though we're going to all be doing this in place at home and online, we'll be able to create that atmosphere anyway. So many students of different kinds have taken this course, ranging from people who have been involved in athletics, some very elite athletes, some purely recreational, some who haven't played since they were kids, some who never played at all, and maybe they're thinking about their own children playing sports and being a sport parent. Or maybe they're involved in physical education or teaching, and they're interested in coaching teams, both competitive teams or recreational teams, youth teams. Maybe some students have had experience in officiating. There are so many different ways, and some may just be taking this because it fits into their schedule. It's really an interesting course because besides being involved with sports, it's really an opportunity to get involved with psychology and learn psychology. Some students in the course are psychology majors, and others have never taken a psychology course. I think it's perfect for both of them because it's a good introduction to psychology. What you'll find out is that just about every psychological school of thought, every principle, every line of research relates to sports. And so it's a good way to review the field as a whole, to be introduced to the field as a whole, and then also to apply these principles to something really interesting, sports, which is really very practical. One of the things we emphasize in the course is the relationship between our common sense and practical knowledge of sports as athletes, as coaches, and professionals in the area with what psychologists have to say, their theories, their research, their practices that they promote. And there's a tension between the two because I think in many ways athletes, coaches, people who even observe sports, the sports media, know more than the psychologists do. In another way, the psychologists know more than ordinary people and even professional athletes do. So there's a tension between life and science, and we'll look at that tension. I think what we really can do in this course is to show how science can benefit practical everyday life, and also show how practical everyday life can benefit science. Another aspect of sports psychology is that sports are a very practical area, and it's an area of life where people want to optimize their performance, want to enjoy the experience. And so the psychology of sport is really a psychology of people who are striving for health, striving for excellence, striving to do their best. And so it's great to actually study an area of psychology where psychology is put to making the most out of life. And another aspect is that sports are, as many people believe, a microcosm of life. The principles that we'll be studying in sports psychology can spill over into virtually every other aspect of our lives and can teach us how to live better, how to enjoy life more, how to develop certain skills that'll really come in handy and make us more effective, make us more excellent, and make us more fun. Like I said, we're doing this online for the first time, and this is actually the first time I've ever taught online, so I've been on a pretty steep learning curve reformatting this course for this kind of a format. You know, I've never done it and never wanted to do it, but I'm finding it so creative and challenging and interesting that I think in many ways the course may be better than ever this way. I hope we can, as everything in this COVID crisis, be in it together. And so I'm going to share with you my experiences of teaching online, and I hope you'll share with me your experiences of learning online. And I really invite you to make suggestions as to how to improve this course as it is being delivered online. I think we can be flexible, we can be creative. In virtually every class, we could talk about how it's going, how we may be able to make it better, what you may need, and I'll try to deliver that, whatever it is, as much as I can. So let's take a look at the syllabus now and go over it. You can find the syllabus on Blackboard, and we'll run through it right now so you have a bit of an introduction to it. First, you'll find the course description, and that says a good bit of what I've already been talking about. I want to talk about the books and introduce the books that we're going to be using. We do have a textbook, which is written by Weinberg and Gould. I don't like textbooks. I'm not a fan of textbooks. I don't like textbook authors. They tend to be second-rate thinkers and to make things superficial rather than digging into depth and being real excellent experts in a field. But this textbook by Weinberg and Gould is actually my favorite textbook of any in psychology because Weinberg and Gould are both great. They're both top-flight sports psychologists who are theorists, who are researchers, and who have written a lot to shape the field. The book that we're going to be using is called Foundations of Sport and Exercise Psychology. Right down here, you can see it at the bottom. And it's been in many editions. I've been teaching this course ever since it was in the 3rd edition, and it's now in the 7th edition. This is the one thing that you'll need to buy. You can either get it online or get it from Amazon. You can use any edition of this textbook as far as I'm concerned. It's been improved and changed, but I think all the editions are great and they'll give you the basics, which is really what I want to focus on. So please do get that book. All the rest of the readings in the course are on Blackboard and are online and available. You won't have to do anything to find them. I should say, though, about the textbook that in case you take a little while to get it sent to you, I do have the first 2 chapters, the ones on personality and motivation, copied and put into PDF form among the electronic readings on Blackboard. So for the first week of the course, you're all set already based on the materials that I'm giving you. But I do want you to get a hold of your own copy of the text because in the 2nd week, you'll need to be drawing on that and we'll use it from there on out. This textbook will give you comprehensive knowledge of sports psychology, actually sport and exercise psychology, although we're focusing on sport. And that will tell you virtually every area that sports psychology covers. It'll start out with all the basic research and the basic theories, and the second half of the course will focus on psychological skills training, the practical application of our psychological knowledge of sports to optimizing performance and optimizing enjoyment. I'm big on enjoyment. In fact, we'll talk about that. How important is enjoyment? And does it contribute to playing well and competing well and being excellent? I think it does. But anyway, sports psychology is a field that does go beyond the usual textbook and the usual psychology that we get. And so I've tried to supplement this comprehensive survey that we'll get from the textbook with a number of different approaches that are going to focus in on what I consider extremely interesting areas of sports psychology. The first one is children's sports. And the book that I've chosen to use is a book by a guy named Wolf, who is himself was a professional baseball player. He coached college teams, he coached high school teams, he coached kids He has had kids' sports camps. Actually, you can listen to him on the radio. He's had a radio show for years called The Sports Edge on Sunday morning on WFAN. He takes questions from parents and addresses them. He really focuses in on the developmental aspects of youth sports, and he's an amazing writer. And this is actually a popular book, but he uses a ton of psychology in his sports book. So we'll check out Rick Wolff. In fact, we'll read that for the first reading, for the second class, along with the personality. The second supplementary text that I've put into the course is on an approach to the sports psychology that's not found very much in the text. And it's the approach called depth psychology, psychoanalytic psychology. And this involves the unconscious and some of the more deep symbolic meanings of sports. It goes into dreams and sports, different cultural experiences of sports, and a lot of the symbolism of sports. To do this, we'll be using collected readings that were actually edited by the person who was once our academic vice president at Fordham, John Holowitz, who is now a faculty member here at Fordham in our Graduate School of Education. And these articles in this book are really interesting, really pretty incredible. I'll say more about them as we go, but all these readings can be found on Blackboard. And I think you'll find they're a little bit outrageous in many ways, and they'll stretch us outside of anything that is covered in the traditional surveys of sports psychology. The final aspect of sports that I want to get into is spirituality and sports. That might seem unusual to you, unless maybe you yourself have had even mystical experiences while playing. We're going to be reading a book called In the Zone, Transcendent Experiences in Sports, written by Michael Murphy and Rhea White. These are going to give us a framework for understanding extraordinary, transcendent experiences, spiritual and religious experiences in sports themselves. And this, to me, is really one of the most interesting aspects of the course. Some of this is pretty outrageous, too, really over the top. And some of this may be a little too far out for you. One thing I find among students, though, is that this aspect of the course grows on them. And even some students who at first find it totally bizarre end up really getting into it and using it in their own work and finding it one of the most interesting aspects of this course. So I would ask you to be open-minded, both to this aspect of spirituality in sports and also the aspect of depth psychology, the symbolic and unconscious dimensions of sports, both of these which go beyond our ordinary experience. But let me go into the nuts and bolts of the course. I'll also give you some recommended readings that are just good books you may be interested in. But I want to talk about the format, the hybrid format that all our summer courses at Fordham are using. The course is organized in 5 modules. There will be 1 module each week, one for the first week of the course, and then 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. In each module, there will be readings. Students will be writing journals, 1 journal entry on each reading. For every group of readings, we'll have discussions on Blackboard. And then all this will culminate in a Zoom class session that'll take place at 1 o'clock. It'll go for an hour and a half, and then there will be an optional session for another half hour. For those who have questions or want to discuss things more, you're free to stay on or to leave as you like. And as I mentioned, we can talk about this and see how to best utilize this session. But you can find everything you need for the course organized in modules 1 through 5. As I mentioned, the synchronous element of the course is our Zoom meetings, which will be scheduled during class time. Again, they'll go from 1 to 2:30, and then the optional session will go from 2:30 to 3. The asynchronous elements of the course are those which students can do at different times, at any time they want. And this will involve, for instance, our Blackboard discussion. Hopefully, every student will get involved in the discussion, which will focus on the readings that are upcoming in the next class. This will be like a collaborative learning environment. Students and I will be able to download things of interest that everyone can take a look at, can go over key concepts, define them, ask questions, receive instruction from me and help from other students. I'm especially interested in using these discussions to focus on difficult material and to answer any questions you have, but also to share personal experiences that are relevant to the course and to connect with other students to really build our kind of collective little learning community through the course of the summer session. And I would also welcome suggestions in the Blackboard discussion on how the course is going, how you like it, what's good about it, what can be improved, and any suggestions you have on doing things better. We'll use these discussions to start off our synchronous sessions when we check in, and I'll also use the difficult concepts that you want explained more deeply or more fully in the class Zoom sessions. The course will also involve homework, especially the readings, including in each session there will be an assigned text, usually the Weinberg and Gould text, and then the supplementary readings, which are all available in the module in Blackboard. And I hope you'll complete these readings before every class, as well as get involved in the discussion before each class. And also on each reading at home, each student will write a journal that will be pretty short, but getting to some of the key elements of the reading and what you think is important, what interests you, and also anything you find difficult. So the Blackboard readings, which are described on the syllabus, will involve first choosing for each reading something you find important, something you find interesting, and talking about what it is that you like, that is important, and explaining the contribution, almost as if you were describing the part of the reading to someone who had never taken the course, has never read it, so that you're explaining it in a clear and communicable way, whether it's a theory, whether it's a method of study, whether it's a research finding, whether it's a professional practice element of the readings, as if you were talking to someone who you really wanted to communicate and help understand it. Also feel free in the journal to reflect on personal examples of experiences that may relate to the reading that you've selected, a practical application, or to connect the reading with scholarship, research, theories, experiences you've had in other courses at Fordham or elsewhere. And then the second part of each journal entry is to identify something difficult in the reading and state what makes it difficult. It can be very brief, but this will help me know what you need help with, and I will take up all of these difficult areas in the synchronous part of our Zoom meetings and try to explain everything that you need explained. In the Blackboard discussions, we'll also focus on the class readings. For each one of the discussions, I list a number of key concepts that we can talk about, clarify, sharpen knowledge. You can dialogue with me and with other students on any aspect of the reading, even beyond the key concepts. And again here, you can make suggestions for the class to follow. This is also a place where you can discuss your personal experiences, connect with other students and the professor, critically evaluate the readings, talk about what you liked, what you didn't like, and evaluate the course material and debate issues that you find in the readings. All the examinations in the course are take-home. So they're each of 5 take-homes, one for each module, will be available after the last class in the module, after Thursday evening, usually on Friday. And you'll have time to work on these until Sunday night. They're due a little bit before midnight each Sunday, except for the last week, which is irregular. You can see that. I'll give you your last take-home exam on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, and it's due back in on Thursday, June 25th. Another aspect of the course is a term paper. Each student will write a term paper, and the term paper will be presented in the last class. These are amazing. I love these. The last class is great because we get a chance to reap the benefits of every student's work on their term paper. The idea of the term paper is to focus on the relationship between psychological science and sports in their lived reality, as experienced by athletes, written about by sports writers, created by film writers and directors. So that each student for the term paper will choose a work from the popular press or a film about sports, about a sport experience, about a sport, about an athlete, about a coach, about anything really relevant to sports, and compare and contrast this work in popular culture with the psychological theories and research that are relevant to this subject matter, including at least one scholarly article or research-based book by a professional sports psychologist, and also drawing on our textbook, our assigned readings, and everything we've been talking about in the course. So students should read the textbook, the assigned readings, and also one that they're selecting beyond all that. Ideally, the student would each of you will develop a dialogue between the psychological science of sports and the popular lived experiences of sports by athletes and that we may see in popular books and films. In addition to sports films like Remember the Titans, A League of Their Own, He Got Game, Rudy, Rocky, I, Tonya, Hoosiers, Girl Fight, Miracle, The Sandlot, Field of Dreams, Raging Bull, Breaking Away, The Natural. I said Field of Dreams twice. It's so good. Or Pride of the Yankees. And any film you like. You could use your most favorite sports film, or you can use some of the films that we may talk about as the course goes on. Or you may use popular texts that you can base your project on. And I list a number of them here. For instance, Zen and the Art of Archery. Bill Bradley, great New York Knicks basketball player, came from Princeton, fantastic forward, who was also a Rhodes Scholar, who wrote values of the game. Actually, when I was a kid in high school, I heard Bill Bradley speak, and his topic was knowing where you are. And he talked about how on the court, on the basketball court, you need to be aware of everything going on around you. You need to have eyes in the back of your head. You need to have an orientation that takes in the complete environment. And he said that that's like life itself. Every situation we're in, we do best when we have total situational awareness, is the technical concept that we'll get into in sports psychology. I don't even know if situational awareness was a concept when Bradley spoke to me, probably in 1967. Bradley went on to have an incredible career as a Knick, and then as a senator, Bradley ran for president, too. Actually, he ran for the Democratic nomination for president, which he didn't get. It was maybe in the 1980s. I don't know when exactly. And it was too bad. I would have loved it if Bill Bradley became the president of the United States. Anyway, there are many other books in basketball, like Phil Jackson's book, Sacred Hoops. Actually, there are a number of works here that get into, like Bradley says, spiritual lessons of a hardwood warrior. You can also read a book on Vince Lombardi, a Fordham guy, one of our 7 blocks of granite, and you can see his statue on Fordham's campus. He's a legendary coach and a very controversial coach. If you're interested in Vince Lombardi, you could read a biography of him, or really any other great sports figure who you might want to delve into psychologically. I won't get into any more of these books, but there are many listed here, and if you go to any bookstore or library, you'll find many, many more, and they're terrific. There are many. Probably your biggest problem with your term paper will be finding a topic, finding a book, finding a movie that you want to work with. But that's something we can discuss throughout the semester. I want to talk a little bit about grades. The final grade will be calculated from 4 factors. The exams, the take-home exams, will be worth 25%. So that's about 5% of the grade for each take-home exam. The journals will be 25%. Again, 5% for the journals in each module. The term paper will be worth 25%. And then class participation will be 25%. That will be based on attendance, participation in the Blackboard discussions, the synchronous interaction in our Zoom meetings, and the presentation of the final term paper in our last class. I should mention that I want you very much to adhere to Fordham's principles of integrity. It's so important to do your own work and to give others who you've drawn on credit for what they've contributed through citations, references, footnotes. At Fordham, we place a lot of emphasis on honesty, and we'll talk about cheating in sports, and integrity, and values, and morality in sports, but we'll also hopefully be adhering to those principles in our scholarship. So you can go over this on the syllabus. Communication with me is always possible through email, and also I'll be available, as I mentioned, for an optional session after each Zoom meeting for a half hour. We can also schedule meetings on Zoom or on the phone at your convenience. I'm always happy to communicate with you. To wrap up this welcome, I want to give you a little bit of a sense of what to expect in our first class on Tuesday night. We'll start out by going around, and each student will introduce himself or herself. I hope you'll tell us all your name, and especially your preferred name, what you want us to call you. Tell us where you come from, what you consider your hometown, or if you don't have one, the circumstances that lead to your not having one. Maybe tell us a little bit of something about you, maybe that might be interesting, or might be unusual, or even surprising. Also, tell us about your connection with sports, whether you played as a kid, whether you still play, whether you see sports in your future, if it's central to your life, or maybe it's not in your life at all. I remember one student who had never played any sports whatsoever. She was actually taking the course because she babysits kids who play sports, and she wanted to do a better job at taking care of them and understanding what they were going through in their sports situations. I've had other students who are interested in being professional athletes. I had one guy, for instance, who was a Fordham football player. I loved this. And he was a senior, so he was actually he had graduated, and he was taking one last course, But he was preparing over the summer to be a cage wrestler. And he had his first wrestling match ever in Las Vegas in August. He was taking the course to prepare psychologically for a career in cage wrestling. I mean, that was outrageous. Of course, we don't all have such an intense and challenging relationship with sports, but everybody has some relationship with it. And I remember one student who had never played any sports at all, and in our first class she said that and said she didn't have anything to do with it whatsoever. And then later in the class, she, with some embarrassment, actually admitted that she in high school was a cheerleader. She expected the real athletes to kind of look down on cheerleading, but she had to admit it. And she wanted to say that everything she learned in the course applies to cheerleading. And she taught us all how all the principles of sports psychology are in play in cheerleading. The physical aspects, the social aspects, the mental aspects, the motivational and emotional aspects, the leadership, the teamwork, and everything else that we talked about. I've had students who never played any sports whatsoever, but they were dancers or they were actors. They were in theater. And they too found, surprisingly, but maybe some of them suspected it beforehand, that sports psychology would apply to these areas too. So maybe even if you don't have any particular relationship with sports, what you are interested in might have a connection with it. So I would say last of all, what we'll talk about in this first introductory meeting is our experience of the COVID virus challenge, what we've all been going through. And maybe you can say a little bit about, where you are, how you've dealt with this, what it's been like to finish your last semester if you were in school in the spring when all this hit, how you've lived through it all, if the tragedy has struck your family, maybe you want to say something about that. I would invite any student to share their personal experience. This has been such a difficult and challenging time for all of us. I don't want to ignore what's going on around us since it's so important. And although we haven't had sports, maybe while we're doing this course, sports will start coming back into play. Maybe while we're in session 1 of summer school, sports will be coming back and baseball will be coming forth. The NFL is trying to see what kind of a season they can have. We've already had a little auto racing. And so the sports world, too, has been affected by the COVID crisis. But we've been affected, many of us, all too many of us, much more personally, and in some cases much more tragically. So how that's affected us is really something that I'm open to throughout our experience together. I don't want to ignore these big things. Perhaps one of us will even become ill during the course. And I want to work with you if that happens in the best way possible. So I won't say any more to dwell on that, but I'll end with just a little bit about myself. I've been teaching. I'm a psychologist, of course, and a research and clinical psychologist. So I've been working in the area of psychotherapy for my whole career since the 1970s. I've been at Fordham since 1985 and have been teaching sports psychology as well as other courses throughout psychology for many years. At Fordham, which I love, I've gotten involved with administration. I chaired the psychology department. Then I actually chaired the communication and media studies department for a couple of years. I also chaired the computer and information science department. And actually, I went into phased retirement 3 years ago. So this is my last year at Fordham. although I may continue to teach in the summer school, particularly if this goes well and it's possible to have a great sports psychology course online. Maybe it's something I'll continue. But anyway, in the course of my phased retirement, just when I was about to actually move to Michigan, where I am right now, I was driving back to New York to get all my stuff and to come back here to Michigan, and I got a call from our academic vice president who asked me to become the acting dean of Fordham College at Lincoln Center, and warned me that for sure it would be for 6 months and it might be for a year and a half. I immediately said yes because I'm loyal to Fordham. I love Fordham. I've said yes to everything Fordham's asked me to do. So I actually never came back to Michigan. And I ended up in New York City being dean of Fordham College at Lincoln Center, which was an incredible experience for a year and a half. I love the college. I've been there since 1985. And that was an incredible year, actually an amazing way to culminate my career at Fordham. So that's my story. And maybe we'll get to know each other better. And I should say a bit about sports. Well, I love sports. I played many sports. I played football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, and played as a kid with other kids in Little League and youth leagues. My relationship with my father, my grandfather, and my mother was very much organized around sports. Actually, I just recently started looking into some of my mother's connection with sports. My mother played field hockey as a high school student, went to LIU, and got involved with the head legendary Hall of Fame basketball coach, who you may not know, named Claire B. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Claire B. An absolutely amazing person. So I've been actually researching the history of Claire B. at LIU. He has the greatest winning percentage of any college basketball coach. And my mother was particularly close with his assistant coach, a guy named Pick, who they called Pick, Coach Pick Piccarella, who's in the LIU Hall of Fame. And she worked with Claire B. and Pick in a children's boys camp on Coney Island, a basketball camp. And she was one of their assistants and administrators of the camp. So she got into children's coaching. She was totally into it. And actually, I think my values education from my mother was actually derived from what she learned from her two mentors, Pick and Claire B. So that's kind of infused my life through my mother. And as a kid, I was very into sports. I liked sports. I hated school. So I actually only started to like school in college. And but I loved sports. So my childhood was all about sports. Played Little League, and I came from a very competitive town where when I was an 11-year-old and 12 years old, our all-star team in Little League won the New Jersey championship, and we had hopes of going to Williamsburg and winning everything, but unfortunately we got beat both times and didn't make it. But what a great experience that was. And I went on playing, and actually, even as an adult, went back. Baseball was my favorite and best sport. So I played in rec leagues and competitive leagues for over 40s, even when I was 60. And unfortunately, I've struggled with some injuries, and I'm not playing right now, but I keep thinking maybe I'll get back into it. So sports have been an amazing part of my life. Actually, I've been a New York Giant season ticket holder since 1960. So I first went to all the Giant games with my father, my grandfather, and my mother. And since then, I've taken my own son, who's become a Giant fan. Actually, when he was 5 years old, he informed me that he was a Dallas Cowboys fan. I think that was part of his rebellion against me. That was great, but that didn't last long. He definitely bleeds blue and became a Giant fan early on and continues. He just had his son, and hopefully he'll be introducing him to the family tradition and taking him to Giant games in the future. So you see, anyway, that's me and my connection with sports. I really look forward to this course, to learning from you and all of your experiences prior to and in the course with our readings and your work on your term paper. And so I look forward to your introductions and to meeting you on Tuesday night. Actually, it's Tuesday day, 1 o'clock sharp. So 1 o'clock to 2:30, we'll get together. If anybody wants to hang out from 2:30 to 3, I'll be here then too. So see you. I hope you're all well and healthy and safe and thriving in a time that I think has tremendous potential for positive transformation. I think that's one of the major focuses of the course. The challenges can always be turned to our benefit and to our optimization of life in terms of our excellence, our transcendence, and our thriving. So I'll leave you with that and see you on Tuesday.